105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 8:57 on this Wednesday morning. It's O'Connor and Company with Larry and Cassie Smedley. And Cassie, get ready because Chris Plant's going to be coming into that room soon. You know how he is.
Oh, no. That,
yeah.
Thanks for the warning. I needed that.
No problem. It's part of our health and safety regulations here at the studio. Joining us right now is Luke Rosiak. Luke Rosiak is an investigative reporter at Daily Wire. Luke, so the Maryland General Assembly's Department of Legislative Services had auditors look into the foster care program that the state oversees and uncovered some disturbing results here, including, by the way, which, of course, this is not getting much attention, but Luke Rosiak is a good reporter, and he found this information. I mean, it's absolutely despicable that the state allowed for at least 10 children to live in foster homes with registered sex offenders. Are there not background checks for parents who become foster parents?
Yeah, I've read a lot of government audits, and this one by Maryland's version of essentially the Government Accountability Office. The language wasn't the sort of dry language that these auditors normally use. You could tell that they were absolutely shocked and enraged by the Department of Human Services and the Social Services Administration in Maryland, because time and again, the shortcomings have been brought to their attention and they refuse to change. It's part of their job to make sure that the background checks are done before a child is placed with foster care parents or in a group home. It's part of their job to make sure that the kids are being taken to the doctor by those parents and that the kids are going to school. And they didn't do any of that stuff. People were paid to do those checks, but they would just kind of rubber stamp the papers without actually looking. And as many as half of the background checks not only were not done, oftentimes the county or different government agencies are supposed to do these background checks, but the people paid to be the backstop, to double check, they also missed it. And they falsely said that the background check, they falsely said we confirmed that it was done. It wasn't. So 10 foster children just last year were living with registered sex offenders on the sex offender list in Maryland, 7 of these kids. And for example, in 2023, Maryland checked a foster home where people were paid to take these kids. And they didn't realize somehow that this foster home was employing a registered sex offender convicted of molesting kids 10 years ago. Well, 3 months after they missed this opportunity to do something about it, the guy goes and molests 3 foster kids in his care. And the auditors say even after that, the government agency didn't really take any steps to reform.
Yeah, no corrective action needed there. And I want to hand it over to Cassie, but real fast answer, Luke, if you could. Were the background checks actually executed, or were the results ignored, or were they faulty or falsified results?
I think they never did them, and they were incompetent, and the auditors were able to join the lists of foster homes, the addresses with the registered sex offender list.
So the auditors were able to do it lickety-split, but the Social Services Administration apparently just didn't do it. Okay, go ahead, Cassie. Sorry.
This is just one of the most horrific stories I've heard in a long time, and we get a lot of bad news in our world today, and I just feel for those children and the fear that they must have felt. And Luke, I wonder if you know from your reporting, were the children at least removed from the homes as soon as they figured this out? And I know that nothing had been done previously, but since you're reporting, are you getting any sense that any consequences are going to take place for anybody involved in this, especially all of the people that you pointed out who did not do their job to carry out these background checks initially?
So here's what the Social Services Administration said in response to the audit. They acknowledge that our regulations for foster parents lacked a crimes of violence prohibition required by the Social Security Act, so we're updating this regulation. And then they said, after the cases of the children living with sex offenders were identified, quote, we took action In one case, we contacted the Office of Parole and found that while the identified individual was on the sex offender registry, there were no restrictions prohibiting their presence around children. For the remaining cases, law enforcement and probation officers determined that there was insufficient information to warrant a welfare check. So they're saying it's fine that these kids were living with sex offenders because there's nothing stopping it, and the cops didn't even bother to check. This is why Delegate Kathy Zaliga said this audit of Maryland Social Services is absolutely abhorrent and reads like criminal negligence. Mm-hmm. Governor Westmore must immediately fire somebody. The buck stops with Human Services Secretary Rafael Lopez or Executive Director of the Social Services Administration, Dr. Aldril Studstill Jr.
Or Westmore directly, yeah. And these auditors, by the way, the state had been announcing and putting out in official statements that all the children who were in foster care were attending school, and the audit showed that 38% of those foster children weren't attending school on a regular basis. That's not a rounding error, Luke.
No, I mean, we talked about, the missing migrant children that, just kind of who knows where they are. And there may be a similar situation with Maryland foster care because basically under Alger Studstill, it seemed like they weren't just giving out welfare. They were treating their jobs as welfare. This was a government check that they felt entitled to get while they just sit there and do nothing. And they didn't care that the kids were being abused. They were paying a convicted murderer to provide one-on-one care to kids in hotels, and they were paying $1,300 a day to keep these kids in hotels instead of, $300 or whatever for placing them in a proper home.
That was that Westmore Jobs Initiative when he first came into office, right? And we got to leave it there. Luke, a great story at Daily Wire. Read all of it. Luke Rosiak, byline, dailywire.com. Thank you, Luke. It's 8:43.